Hey man,
Hi, how are you? You good?
can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Amazing. Hi, nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Hi. I'm such a huge fan. I swear to God, I'm still on LinkedIn only because I love your posts so much.
Nice. Yeah, it's become definitely an addiction. It's when my little lad wakes me up in the morning, I'm like, I must post while the TV's on.
Right.
I see some good books behind you.
Ah, yeah,
The Reagan one there, and
yeah,
book about books as well, which is a big thing.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I
Clips
love that one.
Stamp Fold as well. That's a great book.
Hmm. I agree. There's also Vanguard and Tonic and all that stuff. So
Oh,
this is graphic design. The thing that's not visible is comic books and graphic novels and things.
nice. So
Yeah.
I'm going to
I
do
see
it.
some amazing posters in your
Oh
background.
yeah, I'll hold one up before the talk starts. This is one of my favourites.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's Carlos Gablaze, German
Hmm.
designer.
How did you amass such an amazing collection? How long has this been going on?
Since about 2011, since I was studying, and it's just every time I get paid, I spend too much money, really. So, but yeah, there's always stuff like I've got on my desk.
Wow.
It's really nice things that are required there. I'm just going to let some people in.
Yeah,
But before I let them in, I'll do a quick introduction,
sure.
yeah, I'll introduce the ISTD, talk about your practice, and
Hmm.
then I'll leave it over to you, and then there'll be some Q&A at the end as
Okay,
well. So
perfect.
just let everyone in. There we go. And there'll be people watching from live on the website as well.
Yeah.
Let's so I'll just spend a few minutes letting everybody in.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed looking through your work and the typeface related matter on Instagram as well.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I keep
And I watched your talk. It was really great.
I keep looking and liking. I'm like, oh, I like that, so I'll save that.
Oh, Hendrik is here. Hi, Hendrik.
Hi, everybody. We'll be starting in around 5 minutes. There's people still joining, so I'll let everyone in as they connect in. Tend to sip all my water within the first 5 minutes of starting presentations every time, and it gets halfway through, and I'm like super dehydrated.
Oh, yeah. I'll drink some water myself.
All right, everybody, we'll be starting in a few minutes, a few short minutes. Feel like we're before the talk start, we should get a little jingle going, a little song. You know, like when you're in a lift or something.
Hi, Shiva.
Hi, Astrid. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
So nice
Such
to
an
see you after so
honor.
many years.
Really looking forward to this. What time is it for you?
It's 5:30 in the evening.
Okay.
I think I've made this a little too long. I'll try to go as fast as possible.
Yeah, I always do too many slides and then I talk too fast and then
Yeah, same.
Is that over now?
It would be great, Shiva, to have maybe 10 minutes of Q&A at the end,
Yeah.
if possible, but no worries if you run over. I'm going to switch myself off. Just wanted to say hi, Shiva. I'll see you again at the end.
Sure. Thank you.
A few more people. I keep going to the start and then and some more people join us. I'll just leave it a few more minutes, everyone, so I could just make sure everyone's joined. Right, I'll make a start, and if anyone else joins, I'll let them in the waiting room. So
Sure.
Hello everyone. So I think this is his first ISTD live at lunchtime in the UK talk. I'm here today with Shiva Nallaperumal, who I'm really excited to learn about his practice and the work he's been doing. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Matt Lamont. I'm an ISTD board member, co-director of Outplay Studio, and a lover and collector of print as well. So this talk is part of a ISTD live series of events. If you follow ISTD on social media, keep an eye out on the posts there and you'll be able to see upcoming events. You can also view previous events recorded on the ISTD website as well. Before I introduce Shiva, a few details about ISTD. So we're a professional body run by typographers for typographers, graphic designers, educators, and design students. We have an international membership and we aim to create and inspire interest in all forms of typographic practice. You can find out more on the ISTD website. For those of you who are in London in November, we're going to be having a live event too with Regine Del Bello, who's designed the wraparound poster for the latest ISTD publication, Typographic number 73, which you can purchase on the website if you're not a member or you don't currently have a copy. That event will be in person in London on November the 15th, and we'll be sharing more details about that on social media too. So a massive thank you for the team behind this event, for all the hard work, all the support from the board members, everyone who shared the event and attended today, and a real pleasure to introduce Shiva, who was going to talk about his practice, his projects. He does amazing work in type design, lettering, posters, branding, such a breadth of great work. But yeah, I'll let you talk about your work because you're best placed than me to talk about that. And we'll have some room for Q&A at the end. So if anyone wants to sort of put a message in chat, or we can do that via video at the end of the call, whichever people prefer. So yeah, I'll hand that over to you.
Thank you. Just share my screen. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
All right, thank you first. Thank you so much for having me. It's really, really great to be here. And ISTD, actually, the first ever award I've ever gotten professionally was from ISTD many, many years ago. So it's very nice to like kind of come back in a way. I want to thank Acid and Matt for having me and for the invite. And yeah, I'll begin. So I want to start, before I kind of introduce our practice, I want to start with a couple of things that we're always kind of thinking about. So first and foremost, there's no such thing as a conceptual typeface, right? The idea that any typeface is very dependent on its own production, and therefore there is no such thing as a conceptual typeface. Most type design, I mean, not most, all type design from history are really about how far one could go in the craft, right? So in a sense, each designer or each punch cutter was really trying to outdo the last one and how far and how technically proficient they can be. So if you see the kind of progression of type design from the 1500s to the 1800s, it's really about how thin the lines can go, how high the contrast can go. So it's really about the skill and the making and the craftsmanship. And through all the technological advancements, type has remained a craft. And no, I don't think any other field has gone through such radical changes where a change would, in a sense, make the last person obsolete. When it moved from metal to photo to digital, each of the design, like the greats of each period were not kind of, I mean, the skills were not transferable, which I find really interesting and fascinating. And yet the idea that, you know, through all of this migration, type has remained a craft. So I wanted to, early in my career as a student, I was very interested in this idea of craft versus conceptual sides. And I wanted to kind of try to challenge that a little bit. And I looked at conceptual art and what it did to art to become conceptual. This very famous work, Erased de Kooning drawing, where the artist basically erased a piece by another artist, and that then became the artwork. And this piece, 433 by John Cage, which is essentially music but silence. And I like both of them, and the central concept in both is how they're redefining the definition of art, and that then is the definition of conceptual art. So I wanted to see if I can apply the same thing to type design. If I can redefine what type design is or typeface is, maybe then that can become a conceptual typeface. And at the time, I was very interested in Arabic Kufic lettering. It's a style of Arabic lettering that originated for architectural tiling. So it's letter forms that's readable, but within this grid where there is a relationship and it's for patterning and tiling. And I wanted to see if that can be done with the Latin script. The point of this is that letters modulate and kind of arrange themselves based on what letters precede and succeed them. In Latin, it would be like this, except in a font, you can't really do that because the very definition of a typeface is repeating shapes, right? So you design one letter and then you put it in the mold and then get the punches, and that then becomes the letter forms. But what if now with open type technology, what if we're able to kind of do this, find a gray area between lettering and type design? And so I won't go into all the details, but we basically analyzed, it was a problem solving exercise. We analyzed what the problematic letters are, like O, R, and M are totally fine, but P, L, T, F have these spaces. So then a system was devised by which each letter is designed based on the problematic letters. So the first one on top is called E.F under, and it will only appear if an F is typed before it. And you apply this to all the letters in every combination possible. And thanks to OpenType, what happens is when you're typing, it kind of understands what you're going to type and it replaces itself. So this typeface was an early experiment. It was published by Typographic in trying to find a middle ground between these two worlds that that I'm very interested in. So in that sense, is it a typeface? Because it is not repeating shapes, it's unique shapes. As you can see, this is the Illustrator glyphs panel, and usually a typeface has 300 characters, a Latin typeface. This one has over 7,000 to enable the kind of changing. So it is not technically repeating shapes. A lot of shapes are unique. So in that sense, is it really type design? And this dichotomy between craft and concept has always been very central to our work, whether it is very magazine design, which is a very large project with lots and lots of moving parts, art direction, photography, layout, type sizes, hierarchies, versus a piece of lettering that's just really, really intricate and difficult to make. So craft and concept have always been like this really kind of, very important pillars in our work. And there's a third awkward one called authorship, which sometimes works out, sometimes doesn't. And this kind of confusion between these three has always been central to the work that we do at November. So November is a design studio that my partner Juhi and I formed in 2018 because we felt we wanted to create a studio practice that takes into account our interests and various fascinations, and we can explore those. So quickly running through some of the commercial projects that I'm not going to talk about in detail today. We do a lot of work in fashion and publishing. This is the Elle magazine cover we designed in early 2020. And we've also designed an installation for their event. This is my partner Juhi on top of the installation. And we've done other kind of more physical projects, branding, curation, art direction, and type design, of course, has always been a very core part of my own practice. Display typefaces, from really simple, fun, single-weight display typefaces to really complex, really large, multi-script text fonts like Ollie Grotesque. And we've also done a lot of identity work, especially in terms of the Indian context, more type design, corporate type design. And we've also done a lot of work in the Indian fashion space. There's an identity for this brand called Eka. There's an identity for Ensemble is like Saks Fifth Avenue in India. It's like a large department store. And also other complex branding work. This is a news organization that we designed the entire system for, broadcast, video, website, magazines, more magazines, and lots and lots and lots of books. So our practice has been quite varied, and we work with all kinds of different clients in different fields. But we have kind of maintained this idea that this practice is a way through which we explore our various interests. And some of these interests are, identity, visual culture, modernism, postmodernism, printing, craft, blah, 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 blah. So there's lots and lots and lots of things that we like, that we're interested in, and we find ways in our commercial practice and personal practice to kind of work with them. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of commercial projects and a couple of personal ones to kind of explain our kind of process, and also talk about where things really come from, which I've always been very interested in. Where do typefaces come from? What is the idea behind typeface? Why the shape and why what? So one way in which a typeface gets formed is through an identity, where we work with a brand and there's a very specific brief and we're trying to create letter forms that make sense in that context. This is one of our first clients, actually, when we started in November. Bodice is a brand, independent fashion label in Delhi. Richika, who is the founder, won the Bulma Prize, first Indian woman to win the very prestigious award that was previously won by Yves Saint Laurent, Karl Lagerfeld, and so on. And it's an amazing brand with a really, really strong voice. One second, where's my... with a really strong voice. And one of the things she's really interested in is to kind of make visible the construction of the garments. So pleats that are usually hidden on the inside become her visual element on the outside. So her work is very iconic and very identifiable. And when we talked to her about branding and about projects, it was really, we were talking less about fashion, more about architecture and city planning and things. So and there's a lot of even in her lifestyle, very gridded, and she's really like kind of a perfectionist and very particular about certain things. So we felt that something that breathed fashion, like a ornamental serif, will definitely not work. And we went more in the kind of Wolfgang Schmidl logo for Brown kind of way, which we really loved. And we created a grid in which these letter forms were created. And then the grid kind of led to the entire alphabet as well. The idea was that it's a fashion brand, and every year she's going to have 2 seasons. That means 2 different kinds of concepts, 2 different kinds of campaigns, photo shoots, whatnot. So we want to create a brand that kind of grows with that and is very usable. So instead of creating a logo that's just slapped on everything, we thought we'll create a typeface that her team can then take forward and make graphics with. One of the central ideas in her work is this interplay between solid color and thin lines. So we wanted to kind of bring that into the typeface as well. And so, one second, sorry. And so bodice has 2 weights, bodice solid and bodice pleats. And this kind of interplay between these 2 is central to the brand. And we always, in our custom projects, we always try to create typefaces that only work for that brand and won't really work for anything else, which is the point. So because the typeface is monospaced, kind of monospaced, it's like a tricky monospace where there are like 3 different widths that the letter forms follow. The letter forms fit within a very nice system. So her internal design team has to do is type things and then work with space and tab to kind of create these compositions. And with her kind of campaigns as well, we worked on the art direction for the shoot. Her first collection after the rebranding is really loud, really kind of referencing early Bollywood, like really colorful and kind of pristine and luxurious. So the typeface then becomes really loud and really big. And the next collection, the winter one, was really somber and really quiet. And so the typeface then takes on that role. So the idea is that the typeface moves with the brand and as to what they want to do while remaining kind of central to the identity. And then other projects that we did, this was, I'm sure you guys have heard of Design Yatra. It's a conference in India. I think it's India's biggest design conference. I think it is Asia's biggest design conference as well. It's very well known. Very well known people have spoken there. Neville Brody, Paul Barnes, Paul Asher. It's a big deal. And each year, a different design studio does the identity. In 2019, November was asked to create the identity. And it was a very interesting, opportunity also to think about our ideas of craft and design and authorship. And the theme each year is different, and the theme is very important to the conference. It's really hardcore in the sense that you work with people to kind of make all the presentations on theme, and it's this really nicely branded thing. So the theme this year was on the contrary, meaning all the speakers and all the events, everything was geared towards people who have been contrarians in their fields in some way. So our identity can either look contrarian, or we wanted to kind of talk about something in our current culture that we are contrarians towards. In that sense, I was looking at the prevailing design movement of our time, which Claire L. Evans, the writer, calls corporate Memphis, which is the Silicon Valley visual language of the world, right? So there's illustrations of people and all, the amazing thing is all of these illustrations are from different brands, which I don't think anyone can ever guess. No shade or anything, but it's just a design movement that's happening. And the point is that it is a style that originated with somebody, and then it is kind of carried forward all over the world. Like startups in India have the same visual language, which never made sense to me. So there's one thing that we also wanted to unlearn the things that we learned in design school, which was purely modernism and so on. So our idea was to kind of think about what our background is and what we grew up and what we find to be aesthetic. And the thing is, I grew up with horror films and heavy metal and Tamil movie titles and stuff. So the idea is that when I came to design school, all of this was not kind of studied or looked at as design, rather just as elements of our culture, right? And if I look around, this visual chaos. There's this idea in Indian visual language. There's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of print. There's a lot of. I mean, why would there need to be 7 posters of the same thing on the same wall? But it happens. This is the visual language that is in our environment. So I wanted to kind of talk about all of these things and bring this into our kind of visual language for the brand. And so the identity, there's actually no identity. The identity is really chaotic and really in the last minute, because one of the things, central ideas behind visual production is the DTP culture, where there's a DTP office and everything is done last minute, right? Like you want a business card and you go there, it'll get done on that minute. So the idea was we really wanted to bring that kind of urgency into the work And so we changed our process as well. So it was also contrary to our kind of process of designing a brand where we always look at the larger picture and how it will translate and how it will be kind of scale. But here we want to go anti-template and try to create something that has to be made in the minute whenever they need it. So if the colors seem familiar to you, it's because we ripped off the never mind the bollocks cover. Because we felt that, you know, if we're going to do something that's so varied, all kinds of different font layouts, the only thing that branding really needs is a very strong color, right? So pink and yellow and black, and they keep shifting importance. And that's pretty much all we need for a brand. But everything else, repetition, craziness, Xerox, all of these elements come through. And it really becomes about balance and contrast, and all these really evergreen Gestalt principles is really what it comes down to. Another thing, like I was saying, the idea of anti-template, we didn't want to, like any event would have a template for social media and posters where there's a speaker photo and then name. And so we wanted to go against that a little bit and design each thing anew. And again, in the last minute. So when the client tells us, okay, David Carson speaking, it's confirmed, that's when we'll start working on it. So I think that last minuteness and the fact that we have only an hour to make it really kind of brought in the element of chance and element of, you know, like what are we going to do? And there's this intuitive process that then starts happening. So each speaker got their own kind of lettering and their own posts, their own logos and compositions. And we just kept going because, you know, we, again, like the idea of craft is that you do something again and again and you enjoy it. And so obviously these references that we were looking at and grew up with start seeping into the work as well. So then, yay, here we have craft, concept, and authorship in a project. And authorship really comes through in our type design projects. Type design offers a huge amount of authorship. And it's a very weird kind of field if you think about it, because you don't know who your clients are going to be. So you design a typeface, you know, retail typefaces. You design a typeface because you have an idea and you think it needs to exist in the world. And then you hope that people find that in the typeface and use it. So, and you don't have any control in how the project or how your font is going to be used. So then what is the point of, I mean, what is the reason in which typefaces get designed? And this is something I've always been very interested in, and how feelings, like very abstract thoughts and ideas, come into letter forms. So one example is this typeface I've been trying to draw for a very long time. I've always been very interested in the early computer era before the personal computer revolution, where it was just this small little cult in Western America, where all this whole culture was happening, and there was this kind of feeling that the world is going to change, right? So the computer had just come in, and it was still this big clunky machine, and everybody was trying to make the next thing. And there's this visual language that started happening, and early type design, like what Matthew Carter worked on in the very early days, all of this started coming through. You know, there was this period of, what do you say, optimism, digital optimism. And I wanted to create a typeface that is reminiscent of that era. And I knew that it has to do some, I mean, it has to have that feeling, but I didn't know exactly how to get there. And I knew I didn't want to just create a pixelated typeface, rather something that feels like the era, but actually is not. So again, there's no way to kind of articulate this in a better way than to actually make the letter forms. And I tried, and with type design, all type designers can relate to this, is that you have something in your head, it's very clear in your head, and yet you're not able to draw it, right? And you try it, and you try all kinds of things, and then sometimes it just clicks. And so I've been trying to draw this typeface for years, and it never clicked. It's never feeling right. And then one night I was actually, this is a true story, and sometimes it is this weird. One night I was in bed, and I was thinking about this. Not like I was working on it or anything, but I was just randomly thinking about what makes, I mean, the thing in my head, the letter form in my head, how does it feel, right? So I was looking at the O, and what happens in a pixelation. So there is a letter form, and when it gets pixelated, the curves get turned into straight lines. So there's straight lines that intrude into what is generally curved areas. So I was looking at where straight lines intrude. So there's a circle, there's an O, right? It's just two circles. And then this, if I include straight lines on the verticals, then it becomes an industrial letter form, like DIN, right? It feels industrial, it feels like signage. But what if I instead put the straight lines on top? Then it becomes this really weird, clunky place. And that looks like an intrusion, right? And the minute I thought of this, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And then I literally got up at 2 a.m., went to the computer and started drawing because it made sense. Suddenly I had this idea. And it's not a radical idea, it's just that I thought of it so late. And so then I started adding these straight lines where they're not supposed to be in a letter form, in the horizontals on top. And then the typeface started feeling right. It started feeling like early computer. It doesn't feel like new technology. It feels like old technology, right? And that was very, very important. And the lowercase as well, especially if you look at the uppercase R and the lowercase E, it starts feeling really clunky and really weird, but it feels technological. And I still, I mean, this is a work in progress. I'm not yet completely happy. It's not exactly where I want it to be, but it's getting there, and a lot of type design is exactly that. It's trying things. And this feels really right, like Typographic, when you write like some really corporate name, it feels kind of right. But there's still a lot of work to be done. But I just wanted to kind of touch on how the process of type design actually happens. Like you have this really abstract idea, which is the conceptual idea. And then there is a very formal way to achieve that idea, which is the craft, right? Like the formal idea of putting straight lines where they're not supposed to be. And that's a very technical craft kind of decision. And this has been central to our work, like I said, this dichotomy. And again, another thing about the typeface is I wanted it to work as a really good text typeface while conforming to genre conventions. And it's still going on. It's a work in progress. If anybody wants to try it out, just email me. And other typefaces are conversations with history. I was designing this book cover for this publisher, and it's a leftist book. It's actually about the history of ethnic cleansing and militant activity in Northeast India. And I wanted to create a cover that was really serious and really had this really, really kind of, what do you say? It's academic. So I wanted it to feel that way. And I wanted it to be really serious. And I was looking at these book covers by Willy Fleckhas, who is an amazing, one of the great heroes of graphic design. And he uses this typeface, which is really specific and beautiful and scary almost. And I wanted to find out what it was. And it's called Modern Times. And it's basically Times, like a Times New Roman, but like a really black display version of it. And nobody actually knows who designed it. I've tried in all kinds of I've tried researching, but there's no designer credit. It was designed and published by this obscure type company called Lettergraphics International in the 70s. And I felt that this was perfect. And because I couldn't license the font, I started making it. And this was a very specific thing that I wanted it for. And it's a revival. I didn't want to add any of my own ideas into it. But sometimes in a revival, some improvements can be made. Like, for example, if you look at the G, lowercase g, it's a really bad design. Like you can look at it and say the guy probably didn't have much time to do it. And so the G here is a lot more refined. And the spacing is a lot more refined. And start typesetting it in context. And I wanted this serious academic, but at the same time, quite scary kind of feeling. And sometimes when I'm working on fonts, I put it up on Instagram, and a couple of my friends, I send betas to friends to try it out. And this friend of mine, Chantal Johnson, who works for Pentagram in New York, she was designing a book as well, and she wanted to try the typeface out. And so I sent it to her. And weirdly enough, both our books published at the same time, and they're pretty much like a very similar subject matter. One is about leftist movements in Northeast India. The other is a leftist book about class war and climate change. So it's very interesting that, I never spoke to her about the context of my typeface. I didn't tell her about my book or what I'm trying to do with it. But it just so happens that both of us were looking at these letter forms and feeling the same way. And I love when that happens. I love when type does its job, when it kind of creates a middle ground between two very disparate ideas. So at the end of the pandemic, I had to kind of undergo a really hard reset. The pandemic really, really took me out in terms of, creative production. Both Juhi and I felt this crazy, creative block. And the commercial work was still going on. And so we started feeling, I don't know, I can't explain it. It was a really terrible time. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate. And I really could not relate to all the people who became suddenly very active during the pandemic and doing exercise and reading books and stuff. And I was the opposite. I was doing all of that before the pandemic. And so I had to do a hard reset. So we took up a residency at the Madeline Institute College of Art, where I did my master's around a decade ago. And it's a design residency, so it gave us the time to kind of focus on our own kind of projects, and we can take a backseat from our commercial work. And we just maintained a couple of our long-term clients, and apart from that, we were doing our own work. So mainly, I wanted time to make my typefaces, and we started working on ourselves, like our own projects. So here, I wanted to kind of reset my kind of creative block and kind of get out of it, right? So there were two opportunities. One was Micah has a lecture series, which is really, really well known and kind of coveted. Great designers are called in every semester, and it's a great, I mean, they do a workshop, there's like a talk, and there's a dinner, and it's like a big deal. And those posters, I mean, there's always a poster made for that. And usually those posters are just, it's not like a project in itself. So I took that as my kind of one way to kind of reset myself to work on these posters. And the other is this theater called Charles Theater, which is a minute away from the college, which plays old films. And the curator is this brilliant guy who is a good friend who has the exact taste in films as I do. So it really works out. So he plays all these amazing old films like French Connection and I don't know, Heat and things that I really love. So he asked me to make posters for the films as well. So I thought, I got these two poster projects that are going to happen every week. And so it's going to give me something to do every week and kind of challenge me in that way. And I wanted to come up with some rules for myself. So the rules are each poster is an opportunity to create new visual grammars and letter forms. I'm not going to use a typeface, like an existing typeface. I'm going to letter and create the letter forms. And maybe these letter forms can then become ideas for future typefaces. Two, no texture, photography, or depth. No depth at all, completely flat. I wanted to involve no complexity in the actual making of the poster. Sorry, in the image making side of the poster. Third is only type and color. Fourth, the size matters. One thing that we grew really tired of is a lot of work that we do is digital, has been digital. So we wanted to kind of create these posters in A0 size, like the biggest size possible. But again, it needs, it will be put on Instagram because, that's how the theater advertises the films. So it has to work in both scales. That's a challenge that I wanted to take on. And the last one is form follows fun. There's everything is personal. I wanted to really bring my idea, like, things that I'm feeling and things that I like and don't like, my own personality into the work. So I wanted to see where I was in the work, right? And so the first lecture was for Eric Hu, who's a great designer, one of my all-time favorite designers working today. And there's a very specific, I won't get into, the specifics of each one, but there's this, he is from LA, and that LA-ness really comes through in his work, and he's spoken about it as well, which is the idea of the black letter. And the black letter has kind of gotten this revival now in culture, right? And I've never used black letter because I find black letter to be too strong. It's like banana, anything you put, if there's a smoothie of like a million flavors, you put banana in there, it becomes a banana smoothie. And black letter is like that. It owns every piece of work that you put it on. And I felt like, his work is extremely modern at one go and then really culturally rooted in another. So I wanted to create these letter forms that is a mix between the sans serif and black letter. So it had to be kind of organic, but it had to be both, right? So if you look at the contrast, there is this very divided contrast and these details that are black letter, but not fully, right? And this is the entire poster. If you look at the R, it becomes very obvious that one half of the R is sans serif, the other half is the black letter. And when I take on kind of constraints like this that actually don't make any sense, I really love that. I really love lettering that doesn't make sense, because then the whole thing rests on rhythm, contrast, balance of the visual matter. So this was an interesting challenge to do that. And this typeface, this is actually a typeface, like I drew it in Rover font. So I hope to finish it at some point and maybe someone can use it. The next speaker was Chloe Sheffy, again, an amazing designer. And her work has a lot of, has this interplay between hand-done work and like digital. So she takes printouts, edits them, scans them back in and uses. So there's a lot of hand versus digital work in her produce. So I wanted to kind of choose a letter, like a style that looks into that, right? I didn't want to kind of just I didn't want to imitate her process, but I wanted to find an equivalent typographic reference from history that is like this. So one I found was this typeface called Reporter, which is really beautiful. It started as a wood type and also exists in metal, but it's an imitation of handwriting, of brush handwriting, right? So isn't that fascinating that you do something with brush that has a lot of freedom, and then you have to put it in this, recreate it in this really constrained environment, which is wood cut and metal. And so that backward kind of process is very similar to what Chloe does in her own work. So I felt this was a good reference, and I started lettering. Again, the typeface doesn't exist in digital in a good way, so I drew it myself and kind of created a composition. But I felt that, again, this was too skeuomorphic. It was too old, like it was, right there. So I made the digital version of Reporter, which again can become a typeface of its own, like an interesting script typeface, and using colors that she is well known for. And again, rhythm, contrast, and balance become really important, because when letter forms can stick together, I want it to almost be like vacuum, like there's nothing in between, like nothing can move. Other times the process is completely, not dependent on me. This lecture was very last minute, and Jeremy Hoffman, who's an exhibition designer, was speaking, and he had come as a critic for the undergrads or something, or for the postgrads. So I happened to meet him that morning, just said hi and spoke to him a little bit, and then later they told me that, okay, we're asking him to do a lecture and it's going to be tomorrow, so we need a poster. So it was like I didn't have any time to think about anything, but I thought, I met him for these few minutes. I wanted to make letter forms that feel like the guy. And the thing is, he's really, really sweet, and he has a really soft-spoken way of talking, and he's very comforting in a way. So you just feel really good when you see him. And so the letter forms then take on.
Yeah, you froze there. I was talking to you. I couldn't see you, and I thought, wonder is it me? The weather should have bad.
Can anybody hear that?
Not really affect Wi-Fi, the weather being. Have you ever seen those wee Instagram videos of people pretending it's frozen during a meeting? But there's people walking behind them,
I think someone needs to go on mute.
Jill, quick question. There's a fantastic ISTD talk on at the minute, and it's being recorded.
Matt,
is it available, do you think?
Are you able to mute everyone?
It's absolutely fantastic. I just got
Sorry about that. We'll just come back on that.
It seems to be working now.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry, my cursor disappeared. I couldn't. Again, I'm not able to control my presentation. Just a minute. There we go. Can you guys see this now and hear me? All right. Okay, getting back to it. So I wanted to make the poster based on how I felt talking to him. And I wanted to create letter forms that are very comforting and sweet and really nice. And that's basically what ended up in the poster. And I really love how some things can happen like that, and how feelings and that's really been an interest to bring these kind of abstract things into hardcore, recognizable letter forms that have semantic meaning. More posters. This one was for Jiminy Ha and Laura Coombs, great artists, and a central tenet in both their work is deconstruction. And so the letter forms here are all deconstructed from other letter forms. Like if you look at the M on top, it's actually R and N put together. And each letter form is a mix or is a part of something else that then kind of came together. Again, all of these can become their own typefaces, and that was kind of one of the concepts of, one of the constraints. Another was this film called Graphic Means, which I think everyone should watch. It's a great documentary about how graphic design happened before the computer. So production methods, and typesetting in the metal era and the photo era and everything. And it was really great. And so the poster then becomes this very simple interpretation of one of my typefaces as punches. So this is actually, this type is called Diplomat, which I've published with Commercial Type now. When I was working on it, I kind of made these punch versions of them. And then that then became the poster. Again, everything as you can see is flat, like purely color and no texture, no depth or anything. And the last poster was for Tal Lemming. Tal Lemming is actually one of my mentors. He actually taught me type design, so I pretty much owe my entire career to him. And he was speaking, and it was a great opportunity to kind of pay tribute back in a small way. Tal actually programmed Calcula, the typeface that I spoke about in the very beginning, the one that interlocks. So his personality is, he's really funny. He's really goofy and like has this really self-deprecative sense of humor. And there's never a dry moment when you're with him. And so, and that's one side of it. The other side, he has this uniform system of clothing, right? He only has one thing that he wears every day. He has a gray t-shirt and blue jeans every single day. I have seen him for years, right? And I've never seen him in anything else. And he has a blue shirt for when he has to do something formal. So that's like this iconic look that he has, and he has like, I don't know, 20 pairs of each one. So I wanted to bring these two things together, his humor and his character and this idea of his uniform. So I was looking at, and it had to be very American, right? His work is very, very American. And I was looking at lettering by Harvey Kurtzman, who invented Mad Magazine, which I grew up with, which was one of the reasons why I went to design school. So Mad Magazine has, in the 50s, had this amazing lettering style that they would open all their stories with. And it is a lettering style, it can't be a typeface because of all the complexities. And so I designed lettering that kind of revives that in a way for Tal. And if you notice the color palette, it's actually what Tal wears. So Tal is a white guy, so Tal Lemming is in skin color. And then the only color I've ever loved is in gray and t-shirt and jeans. So it's something that I didn't tell him, but he kind of got it. He was looking at it for a minute and he was like, oh, okay, that's me. So it's funny when people get it, but even if you don't get it, it still works as a color palette, so it's these little things that you hide in your work here and there. So that was the lectures. There were more lectures. I'm not going into all of them. The other side was the Charles Theatre, the films. And it was an amazing experience because for the first time, I got to watch all of these films that I've loved all my life in the theater, like in their proper 35mm kind of screening. And I got complete carte blanche to kind of interpret them. So the first film was The Warriors. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's an amazing, amazing film. Very quickly, it's about a gang. Because it makes sense to the concept. It's about a gang that must escape for their life from, I think, the top of the Bronx in New York to Coney Island, which is like the southmost. So throughout the way, they have to traverse through the subway, and everywhere people are trying to kill them. So it's this really intense thriller that happens in the subway. And one of the things I really loved is there is this piece of design critique that's there in the film, where one of the characters have jumped on a subway train, and they're looking at the map, the Vignelli map that Massimo Vignelli designed, trying to figure out where they have to go. And one of the characters says, man, nobody can read these fucking maps, which I thought was absolutely amazing. I've never seen a design critique in an actual film, but imagine how pissed off the director must have been with these maps to actually include this little nugget in the film. So I wanted to kind of include a little bit of that. So I created this really modernist layout, like a Vignelli layout with Helvetica, and did the graffiti on top of it, as like this mark of, mark of rebellion. The second film was an Indian film called Jalsaghar, or The Music Room, which is the Satyajit Ray classic from the late 1950s. It's one of his early work. It's not, it's kind of overlooked, but it's really beautiful and has these really kind of, it's about classical music, and it's really jangly and like really textured and detailed. So I wanted to look at concrete poetry as a way to kind of interpret this film. And so this was the final poster. It's a concrete poem. It has letter forms in Urdu, Bengali, and Latin, and shapes and colors. And the gold color and everything. It's supposed to be royal. It's about a court, like a royal court where classical musicians kind of compete. So again, feelings, right? Idea of how these can come through. The next film was Beautrevel. It's a French film. It's about a character who's closeted and within the army, within this hyper-masculine, homophobic environment. And so the person is always in the shadows, their actual identity. And I want to kind of play with that. And the original poster also has the shadow as a really important feature. And at the same time, I watched this film called The French Dispatch by Wes Anderson. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. There's a scene in the end where there's a cafe and there's really beautiful lettering on the cafe. And I loved how the shadows fell. And I loved this visual. So I ripped it off for the poster. And this is the final poster because it has the shadow, it has, you know, this texture. And the thing is, we printed all these in the risograph. So Riso brings its own texture in. So technically, I'm not including my own textures. It's a print vestige. Other films, I'll quickly run through them. Inland Empire, which is David Lynch's paranoia classic. And it's really paranoid. It's about TV screens, about surveillance. So I wanted to kind of look into that. And the lettering kind of follows that. And again, like I said, I wanted these posters to work in the largest size and the smallest size possible. So Inland Empire actually becomes more and more and more visible and legible as you kind of go further away. Another favorite is John Waters' Pink Flamingos, and it has a really flamboyant lettering. But again, the idea of craft is very much alive because all of this is custom lettering. And I really, you know, the point is to really enjoy making it. And in all its complexity, putting it together and finding where to put the right, to place the right, Bezier curves and points and handles was the challenge each time. One of my I think Heat is my most favorite film in the English language. And it was being screened. And this was a lot of pressure because it's, again, my favorite film. How do I interpret it? And there are a million ways to do that. I won't get into all the complexity, but an iconic scene in the film is Robert De Niro looking out of his this amazing penthouse into the water. And these sliding doors are very iconic in the film because he's kind of contemplating his kind of future and his identity. So I want to bring this frame as a typographic treatment, and then it became this. So there's no real like reason, or there's no real kind of cause and effect, but it's really just this iconic scene in type. I don't know if it makes sense, but it kind of does at the same time. I like being in that kind of space, right? And again, it works really well at small sizes. The next film, I think there are two more films that I'll talk about. This one is another personal favorite, High and Low by Akira Kurosawa. If you guys haven't seen it, very quickly, it's this amazing thriller where this big corporate guy, is going through this really stressful merger in the office, and he gets a call informing him that his kid has been kidnapped. And the guy wants like $1 million or something. And it's this really tense moment. And then he looks and his son walks by. And he realizes that the kidnapped victim is actually his maid's son. So now he's faced with this dilemma whether, you know, he should pay the money and save this child's life, or be like, it's not my kid, I don't care. So it's about this tension between morality and there's this high stakes situation. So I want to create lettering that feels that way, that feels like you're going to fall off and feels paranoid and feels kind of like vertigo, you know? And this was the final. Again, like as you can see, I'm having a lot of fun making these things. The last film is The Addiction by Abel Ferreira. It's a very interesting film, actually. I didn't really like it that much, but it's a good idea. It's a vampire movie looking at vampirism as a drug addiction, right? It's not really like Dracula kind of thing, but the vampires are actually like junkies. And it kind of grows on this character, and she becomes a monster over time. And it's this really beautiful transition, which I thought, you know, has to exist in type. And this kind of goes back to my heavy metal kind of days as well. So in the end, it really became about form follows fun. And I was really enjoying myself. And then both Juhi and I kind of got rejuvenated by this 1 year of absolute freedom and doing our own work. And then in Jan this year, we kind of restart in November and start working on commercial projects again. And Design Yatra, which we designed in 2018, came back to us this year. 2019 was their last physical conference. And then it was online during the pandemic in the last few years. And now they're coming back. So they kind of came back to us, and we wanted to work together. And it was a great opportunity. And very interestingly, the theme this year is reset. And I was like, wow, things just aligned, because we were technically spending a year trying to reset ourselves. And the theme this year was exactly about that, about how designers have reset their working methods, how priorities have been reset, how working processes like working from home, living digitally, all of these things have been reset. So the idea was kind of going back to that. So our kind of concept here was to kind of, what do you say, take after the year that we were doing. And so we were looking at appropriate ways in resetting our own working methods, right? One way is to design a brand that, again, like templatization. And we wanted to kind of also carry forward ideas that we had last time, right? Kind of have a conversation between these two projects for the same client. And so we started looking at a period of reset in design history when phototype became the norm. So Letraset came out with all of these different fonts. So suddenly phototype, this new technology, allowed people to make the craziest display fonts, which were possible in metal, but it was just not worth it, right? So metal type has a seriousness about it. And then and there was this history of wood type that was kind of crazy. But Letraset and phototype really pushed the envelope in terms of display type and experimental kind of, what do you say, like interesting typefaces and optical effects and stuff. So that was a major reset during that time, which we've always been very interested in. And how these fonts, I mean, where will I ever use good vibrations? It's crazy. Like, why would anyone use that? But it exists, and it's a technical achievement. It's a craft piece, right? And we're looking at all these beautiful other typefaces that seem nonsensical. And within design history as well, like Milton Glaser designed these beautiful fonts in that era. And we wanted to reset our own way of working. And in a sense, we spent a year making our own letter forms. And this time we want to kind of work with other letter forms, work with other typefaces, work with constraints. So we want to create a brand that is plural, that resets itself each time, that is completely unpredictable, because we wanted to kind of also talk about how unpredictable the past few years have been. Like even now it's quite unpredictable, right? We really don't know where we're going in the next few years. So we wanted to create a brand that kind of talks about all of these things. And we started typesetting reset in all these different typefaces, these opposing typefaces, I would say. And all of them kind of hark back to that time. And each one is selected for a very specific reason. Frankenfurter, the balloony one, is an iconic typeface from that time. Baby Fat by Milton Glaser. And we really like this wonton font that is used in, it's kind of a racist typeface, but we also find it very interesting that it is used in Chinese restaurants and stuff, but it actually has absolutely nothing to do with Chinese calligraphy or culture in any way. We want to kind of use it outside of that context that it was designed for. And so we designed the identities. So there's no single logo. The logo is kind of reset. And these are 4 logos that we designed for this year. And we wanted to kind of talk about plurality and how different things are, and different opinions and everything coming together. There's no design movement at the time. So all of these things kind of are floating around in our heads when we're making this. And we worked with this really talented young motion design studio in India called R Square to work on the animated parts. Now, I don't know if sound will play. I hope it does. Can you guys hear anything? The point really was to bring joy back into design. We wanted to make something that's really happy and really joyful and feels good. And it also makes us kind of enjoy making it. And again, we continued our anti-template idea, because the thing is, most of our projects, which are for large clients and for media houses and things like that, where we have to think about branding purely in terms of templates. And it's a really constraining environment, right? Like, we're thinking about how the brand will expand and how the in-house team will take it forward from us. And that really kind of what do you say, rules the design process as such. But in these opportunities where we don't have to worry about that, where it's an enclosed brand, it'll only need to exist for this 1 year, then we have the freedom to kind of break out of that templatized system. So we started making, we created a grammar and kind of way in which things could work. There is no way we can make a brand guidelines based on this. It's purely intuition. And the thing with Juhi and I is that we've been working together for so long. We've actually been a couple since we were 18 years old, and we've pretty much grown up together. And our work is kind of come into this way where we share an intuition. So we just kind of started making these, and there's no similarity between each. And our designer Nishta, who kind of interprets them in animation. So she works on how these things will kind of, translate to motion. And it's this really simple, beautiful way in which they happen. And so this also gives us, and each day we make one post, and we're having the time of our lives making them. And each artist is different, each layout is different, each thing. I mean, we have to think about, will Rouge clap? Will it inflate or will it deflate? All of these little things then come in, and it becomes a really enjoyable thing to do. We can see that we're having the time of our life making these. And of course, as always, we try to bring in things that we like and things that have influenced us into these little ideas. For example, the 3D, if you look at it, I really love the old Max Fleischer cartoons. They're early pre-Disney animated cartoons like Betty Boop and Popeye and stuff. And I love how the movements are very unnatural. It's really difficult, and things actually struggle to come out. And we want to kind of bring that in a little bit. So the 3D essentially is a Max Fleischer cartoon, right? Yeah, I mean, this is a brand that's still happening. The conference is actually October 26, 27, 28, as you can see. And we still haven't finished all of them. We're still working on tomorrow's post. And now we're currently working on how we're going to translate this craziness into print for all the printed objects, like the banners and T-shirts and other printed objects that are going to be there. Yeah. Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of, talk about plurality in our practice in various different projects. And all of them are quite different, quite unconnected, different time periods. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for coming.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I'm sure everyone else did as well. Sorry about a little technical glitch halfway. I couldn't find the mute all because I had the everything on full screen, but we managed to find it. Really great body of work as well. I mean, personally, I love the variety in the work. How there was the fashion brands, and they were very systematic, and the way they approached very much like a modern brand identity. But then I love the use on the newer projects you've been doing, especially using typefaces like Shatter, which they exist on the Electroset sheets and in the Electroset manuals, but you don't see as much being used on a digital basis.
What's interesting is the Shatter we're using is not actually Shatter from that time. It's Line 2's version. It's LL Shatter 77. So they've taken their LL Unica, which is a beautiful typeface, and they've kind of added the Shatter. I mean, they've recreated Shatter in that way. So it's a new typeface based on a really old typeface that we're using in the old way. So it's this really nice kind of cycle that's completed.
Yeah. I'll have to say there's a piece in an old Penrose annual that uses some really cool typefaces for medical conditions like display type. It's really cool. I'll dig it out and I'll send that across.
But, it's funny you should bring that up. Actually, we rated our Penrose annuals for this project, like for research. And that's really where those ideas came from.
Yeah, they're a beautiful set of annuals, yeah. I managed to save a few where they were going to get thrown into a skip, and a university contacted me, and I got a lot of the 1907 ones and 1910s and things like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I have a couple from the 70s, but yeah. I didn't know it was that old. Wow.
Yeah, it was. I think some of them were printed in my hometown where I'm based here in Bradford. I mean, we've not got a big print scene now, but yeah, there was printed at Lund Humphreys that was based here. We've just got a question as well from Reese Kelly, which is they've made a few typefaces. How would you describe getting them out? Do you recommend foundries like Monotype or MyFonts?
So it really depends. If you're working on a typeface, there are so many ways to publish typefaces now. There's MyFonts, there's Monotype. Of course, MyFonts, you can do it yourself. You can set up a Foundry page and publish yourself. Otherwise, I really like working with foundries. I've worked with various different, I mean, early in my career, I knew that I didn't want to set up a type foundry because I was not interested in the whole business side, but I'm very interested in, and also it gives me an opportunity to work with foundries that I really like. So I worked with Peter Bullock at Typographic, with Christian Schwartz and Paul Barnes at Commercial Type, with Sharp Type and Bold Monday. So for me, it's a great experience working with people that I really admire and like, and their kind of advice on typefaces. With Delegate, the typeface that I'm currently publishing with Commercial, Christian actually helped me a lot with feedback, and there was a lot of discussion. So that really, really helped me. So if you have a typeface that you're working on, if it's large enough, usually foundries prefer to publish typefaces that have, it's not a single weight font, for example. I would recommend working with foundries, like work with the team and get feedback, and also makes you a much better, better type designer. Like type design shouldn't happen in isolation, ideally, although it can. But for me, it really benefited when it did. So.
I've got a question here from Joshua, who loves the Inland Empire poster. I love all the movie posters, and especially the Heat one, because now that I know the context behind it, I'm like, oh yeah, exactly. And he says, would you mind sharing a bit more about how those segmented letters were conceptualized and made? Also, how do you put them together so quickly, given the times?
Sure. Before that, because you brought up Heat, that you said that you saw it and then it made sense, which is one of the things that I like, because all of these films are old. Most people who come for the films have already seen it. So the posters, the posters function has changed from inviting people into this mystery to kind of interpreting their kind of versions of the film. So that was an interesting challenge as well in that project. Coming to this question, technically how the letter fonts are made, let me tell you something. Most of the time, I'm just screwing around in the computer, and sometimes I stumble on something, and 50% of the time I can't recreate what I've made because I have no idea. It's just a trial and error. And that was one of the interesting things about this process, because I'm not thinking about templatization at all, because that's mainly what I do, with our studio project. But this one, the idea came from the fact that I wanted scan lines to interpret scan lines in type, and I typeset it in a typeface or letters, and then added the lines, and then it was like, to be honest, most of the time I sit and make something and then spend like 8 hours making it one by one, and then 2 weeks later I find a tutorial on how to do it in like a minute. So it always happens to me. So this one, it was purely manual, but I'm sure there's a much smarter way to do it.
I've got another question here, which is, you mentioned American culture in many references. Were there any references and influences from India, and how did this culture impact you in your work?
Yes, absolutely. I think I don't think I can make anything that doesn't have an Indian influence, because I'm from here, I live here. Especially I think the project, the Curious Design Yatra from 2019 is very much a conversation with our own surroundings here, and how I wanted to make visible the influences that my environment has had on me. But overall, I think, because I've lived, it's an interesting experience living in India, especially growing up in the 90s and 2000s, is that it was the dawn of globalization. And we pretty much grew up with three contexts, right? One is the Indian context, which is our films and music and everything. So that's really heavy. The other side is American culture through TV, Cartoon Network, the movies and Hollywood and whatnot. And the third is British culture, both good and bad, like colonialism, which is the bad, and good, which is punk and post-punk and Peter Saville and all of that stuff that I've grown up loving. So I've been molded by these three very distinct cultures. And of course, in design school, we learn about Swiss design, Japanese design. And I think cinema has influenced me more than graphic design has. Cinema is really by which I've kind of learned the world. And that has been a real influence. So I think in my work, you can definitely say that, okay, this is a reference from this, but overall, there are a million things that have influenced it. I think that's true of everyone living in the world today.
Yeah, it's interesting how kind of just things you watch or things you read and things you see could inspire in different ways. I found that, especially sort of within the last few years, I've become a lot more interested in things like sculpture and abstract painting and graphic design. It's kind of steering me in a way which is, I don't know where it's going to go in the future. It's exciting.
Very much. I think
Donald
Judd and Richard Serra have had a huge influence on me, though I can't really see where. It's some kind of formalism, some interest in texture. I don't know like what it could be, but it's definitely there. And I think it's interesting that there's often talk about originality in our field and what we consume and what we put out in the world. But I think in between those, like we consume all these books, cinema, music, whatever, and then we kind of put out work that is influenced by all of these things. But in between, there's a filter. And I think that's the thing that we can claim ownership of, right? That filter that is unique, that becomes our style. That's informed by our life experiences, our likes and dislikes, what we think is good design, what we think is bad design, blah, blah, blah. And that filter is really what I think we see in other people's work. That I see as this person's style. And sometimes that filter is really strong. Like you can visibly see that this is this person's design. And in others, like I've always tried to keep it a little more, content drives the design sort of way, kind of avoiding a specific style. But I think I have an approach, like Alice Rostron's book, Design as Attitude. There is certainly an attitude that involves humor and involves this idea of craft and authorship and so on.
I've got one more question here, which is how would you advise someone who is keen to steer their career towards type and graphic design from an industrial design background?
I don't know. I think typography is the most important thing in graphic design. Working with type, I think one very good thing was that, like I said, growing up, the content that, metal bands and all these things that I loved, the graphic design of, it's all like chaos. And then in college, we learned like proper modernism, like hardcore. Like one of our teachers, like main teacher, learned under Armin Hoffman in Basel. And so because really formal grid training. And I think that was very, very important. And in my working life, it's always been a fight between these two. And I love that, but the idea is that centrally, there's a foundation of what works and what is readable and what size. So technical aspects are very important. I think that would be a good place to start because that is something that you can easily learn. Intuition is something that grows and that has to happen by itself. So I think a good way to start into graphic design is to learn the very formal stuff. So then you can start learning how to break that later.
So I think that's it for questions, but I just wanted to say a massive thank you as well. And I'll send the chat notes after in case you missed them, but everyone has really enjoyed the talk. It's made my day. I want to open Illustrator now and play around with some type, which I've not done before. I've never created a typeface. I'm inspired. I'm sure a lot of other people are as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining in. I see some familiar faces, and nice. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. See you soon, everyone.
Bye.